Hey everyone, welcome in. We're going to get started here in just a minute. While we're waiting on everyone to join, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from today. I'm Leah. I'm joining you from Portland, Oregon, and the summer's just ending here. It's starting to feel like fall here in the Pacific Northwest, which is really lovely. And I'm excited about today's virtual event. From complex to simple, Flybuys moved from DBT Core to DBT Cloud. If you're just now joining us, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from today. All right, we're going to get started. So some housekeeping things. We have a Q&A tab in Goldcast. Please use the Q&A tab for your questions so we can keep those organized and make sure we can answer all those questions for you. We also have the normal chat. I encourage you to use that for comments on the presentation as well. And then recording, we'll send out the recording within 24 hours after the event, along with some follow-up resources. So please check your email inbox for those. And then a survey. I'll post a survey in the chat towards the end of the webinar. We'd really appreciate it if you took that survey, gave us some feedback. We'd really love to know how to improve these virtual events for you in the future. Alrighty. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about Coalesce, the Analytics Engineering Conference. Then we're going to meet our presenters. Then we'll go into a presentation from Milos from Flybuys, and then we'll go into a DBT Cloud demo with Mark Wan from DBT Labs, and then we've got some next steps on your DBT Cloud journey. Alrighty, so Coalesce. Coalesce is the Analytics Engineering Conference. It's crafted by DBT Labs, and it's coming up in October. You can join us in person in Las Vegas, or you can join us for Coalesce online, which is totally free. We have a killer speaker lineup, lots of networking opportunities, and some workshops as well. So make sure you check that out. There's a Coalesce link in the doc section of Goldcast, and I'll also paste it in the chat here in a second. Alrighty, so today's presenters, I'm Leah Hudson. I'm a senior campaign specialist here at DBT Labs. And then we've got Mark Wan, our senior solutions architect from DBT Labs, doing our DBT Cloud demo today. And then we have Milos Zikic, the lead enterprise data architect from Flybuys, joining us. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Milos to get started on his presentation. Take it away, Milos.
All right, thank you, Leah. And before I get started, I just want to say thank you to all of you kind of taking your time to kind of join this webinar. And I hope that you get some of the interesting facts and information and insights from this presentation. The topic that I'll be covering today is about our journey, the Flybuys journey, from going from DBT Core to DBT Cloud. And really what it is about is really essentially taking you back in time 2 years from like 2 years ago when we were doing the business case, and then stepping you through the business case process that we went through, providing you with some information about the business case, giving you some arguments and reasons why Flybuys decided to go to DBT Cloud, and touching on things like, some of the reasoning, the arguments, the metrics we were looking at, but also looking at some of the, our approach for migration once the business case was approved. And then, also looking at 2 years from now, 2 years from then. So looking at now, 2 years after the business case was approved and we've gone with DBT Cloud, and looking at how we're going with DBT Cloud now. So let me share my screen and we'll get stuck into it. Okay, so a little bit about Flybuys and myself. So my name is Milos. I'm a lead enterprise data architect at Flybuys. I work in the architecture group with a number of other architects. I work very closely with the data platform team and analytics teams. As part of my role, I was looking into new tools to help the data platform team and looking at DBT Cloud specifically. So Flybuys is one of the biggest reward programs in Australia. We have 9.5 million active members. So we do core loyalty program stuff, but also beyond that, we do lots of marketing. We do campaigning and offer management on behalf of our partners through traditional channels as well as digital channels. And on top of that, there's a lot of reporting and insights and analytics of all this data. So in terms of the data, there is 1.4 billion transactions every month that are being made by these 9.5 million active members. There's a lot of data, a lot of things to kind of look after and manage and transform, and this is where DBT kind of plays its role. So okay, so going back in time, going back to 2 years ago, 2022, almost pretty much on 2 years ago exactly, we started looking at, we were using DBT Core already, and we started looking at DBT Cloud. So we were talking about it quite a bit. And in October 2022, we decided to do a DBT Cloud proof of concept. And as a result of that POC, as well as the subsequent assessment that architecture team and data platform team did, it was basically clear to us that adopting DBT Cloud as the enterprise data transformation tool for us was the right thing to do. And the result of that would be, cost savings as well as increased team productivity through streamlining the development and management of these different analytics workloads. So we've gone through the POC, we had a business case together, and as a result of all that, we have actually endorsed DBT Cloud as our enterprise-wide platform for the data transformation within Flybuys. So any enterprise production level data pipelines are built through DBT Cloud. And since then, we've executed our rollout strategy, implemented the core, the cloud, DBT Cloud platform, and have onboarded a whole number of people onto it. So I think we have something like 100 plus or around 100 DBT projects running in the cloud at the moment and being used by a number of teams, a number of both analysts, analytical, as well as data engineering kind of personas within Flybuys. So like with any other good business case, the most important thing for your senior and executive leadership, if you're asking them to kind of approve something like this, to spend money, it's to understand some of the numbers behind it. So we did estimate, we've gone through a pretty detailed exercise of understanding what are the things that DBT Cloud would kind of help us with, and what sort of efficiency gains can actually, provide for us, I suppose, over time. So we've actually estimated that 140 hours can be saved per analyst, and nearly 152, so nearly 4 weeks of time can be saved per data engineer. Now, these are Flybuys numbers. This was our estimates as well on that point in time. But part of the reason why we wanted to kind of look at the DBT Cloud was people not having to manage their own environments. And we were finding that a lot of people are doing that a lot of the time. So savings on that, plus some of the consolidation of some other tools that we'll touch on in a second, are actually we were estimating that 192% ROI. Now, again, this was Flyby specific, based on our scenarios, but based on our environments and things like that. But it was important to kind of put that number in front of our senior management to understand that going to cloud, even though there is a cost to do that, in the long run, it was a right thing to do. So we ended up getting 40 licenses. I think we have roughly around 40 licenses now. We did end up with the enterprise business critical version of the platform, and that's mainly because of the security features of that. And we wanted to make sure that the security is right for us. So we ended up with the enterprise business critical version of the platform. All right. So the other part of the business case was aligning our mission with our company objectives, right? So some of the things that are company objectives for Flybuys, number one being financially responsible, so making sure that we're not wasting money, essentially. And our argument for DBT Cloud was that DBT Cloud reduces the complexity of how we do things, and as well as actually, if you consolidate all the different tools, as well as remove the duplication of effort across teams, as well as not worrying about running the infrastructure to be able to kind of execute DBT core, that all that contributes to savings, really. So That was the kind of argument for the, that, we're trying to kind of meet the objective of being financially responsible. The second thing was doing the right thing, but continuing to build secure and trustworthy systems. So as part of the POC, or as part of the subsequent assessment, I should say, we did a third-party security assessment, vendor assessment. So our security and risk teams work with the DBT labs to understand the security posture of the DBT cloud. So we were able to kind of get all the, to understand their architecture, to get all the, copies of the right certificates and compliance programs in place. So we were quite happy with that result. And also in terms of, how will DBT Cloud help with this? I think it's, we could argue, or we argued that DBT Cloud, is actually even though it's a SaaS kind of platform, it's a lot more secure, really, system than our engineers and our infra people managing around kind of security in our bespoke kind of environment. So, for us, kind of seemed like it's a more secure scenario than what we had at that point in time. And the last thing was strengthening our culture. And this was all about empowering data analysts to produce and, to publish more features, to publish more data sets, more data products, if you will. So prior to introducing DBT Cloud, they were heavily reliant on data engineers. Data Cloud allows them to kind of, increase their velocity. So on the right-hand side, you see some of the target metrics we put into place. Again, these were kind of specific to us. And, you just, if you are going to the business case for DBT Cloud, you want to think about what kind of makes sense for you. A couple of things that I want to call out here that were probably most important for us were, time spent managing infrastructure, reducing that by, a lot, because that's really ties directly into the ROI number. And then the other thing was increasing the number of deployments by 100%. So allowing actually analysts and other teams, not just data engineering teams, to publish their data pipelines into production without having to go through the, data engineering kind of squads. Okay, so talking about, making complex simple at Flybuys. Essentially, we had 4 teams doing 4 different things in terms of data management. So if you can see here, data platform team was using AWS and DBT Core. Another kind of marketing analytics team was using the Snowflake store procedures in AWS. Another analytics team was using SageMaker and R scripts to do data transformation. And then there was another team that's using all of that plus another tool called Dataiku, which is really a machine learning platform. So although you can do all these things in different ways through different tools, we kind of felt that, this is really not, it's really counterproductive. So we proposed 2 future states, 2 different options. One was around, DBT Core, running in AWS infrastructure that we manage. And the other option 2 was the DBT Cloud. So the main kind of difference between these 2 was that on number 1, we manage our own infrastructure, we pay for the infrastructure, but we don't pay for the DBT license costs. Whereas with our second option, we don't worry about the infrastructure at all. We just pay the license cost, and the infrastructure is outsourced. Infrastructure and security, it's all outsourced to DBT Labs. We just get a platform and we start building data pipelines. So you can see here it's highlighted option 2. The future state was going to be DBT Cloud. So that's what we kind of proposed. And I guess this slide kind of summarizes some of these arguments. So, it talks about adoption of best practices. So with something like DBT Cloud and sort of the integrated development environment that it provides, some of these best practices are directly baked into the product itself. So testing, version control, documentation, it all kind of comes out of the box, I suppose. A lot of it does come with a DBT Core as well, but you still have to kind of manage the artifacts around it, and you have to manage the environment around it. So we really like the simplicity of the platform and the fact that everything is kind of in one place, and you don't have to kind of worry about other things around it, I suppose. Now, this is a pretty heavy slide, lots of information here, so I'm not going to go through this. But as part of the business case, we basically said, okay, we want to go to DBT Cloud. And then we compare the current state with that DBT Cloud future state, scenario where we have DBT Cloud. And a couple of things to call out, I guess, is the CI/CD automation. It was very convoluted and really immature at Flybuys at that point in time. Only, data engineering teams was doing it. Analytics teams were not doing CI/CD. Now that CI/CD is kind of all baked into the product, everybody's doing CI/CD. Everybody has to go through environments, migrated code. Code is checked in and moved across, and it's done properly. And in terms of down at the bottom, the cost. I think we already spoke about this, but with the current state, we paid a lot of money for running the AWS services to run the DBT core. In the future state, there was no infrastructure cost, but we do have a license for the DBT. And then security, again, we managed security. Not necessarily, we have security engineers, but they look after a whole bunch of different systems. So getting their time to kind of manage DBT as well, DBT infrastructure and environments, it's also kind of conflicts, and there's a problem with prioritization and managing the right environments and vulnerability checks and all that stuff. All that stuff is now kind of outsourced to DBT Labs, which is really nice. Okay, so part of the POC, just some of the results from that POC in October 2022, things that we liked and we didn't like. So DBT Cloud takes away the pain of managing infrastructure and lets people focus on application development, so building pipelines, which is great. DBT Cloud provides this really nice web-based IDE, makes it easy to kind of develop code, to manage code, integrates with Git directly from the IDE, so it's really nice and simple. Getting started with DBT Cloud is very easy. It has a very nice RBAC, so role-based access controls, where we can kind of set up different teams. We can set up administrators for different areas and things like that. It does have this kind of auditability, captures logs of all the events that are happening within that environment. So anybody logging in, running jobs, changing jobs, all that stuff is kind of captured behind the scenes in a log. This was kind of important for us because, we have 9.5 million members. We have some sensitive data around our members, and some of these workloads are, working with this sensitive data. So it was really important to kind of have a secure environment that has a proper auditability behind the scenes. And DBT Cloud presented that. Doing that with DBT Core, it's a lot more complicated. If people are running DBT Core on their local machines and, working with the data almost through their own kind of local environments, it's kind of hard to kind of keep an audit of all that stuff. There is a set of DBT Cloud APIs, which are useful for, getting the metadata out and loading it to things like data catalogs. We are not using directly the APIs ourselves, but we do have a data catalog that now integrates nicely with DBT Cloud. So it can actually get all the lineage data out, and we can see that in a data catalog, which is really good. Upgrading DBT versions is very straightforward. So in the past, it would take weeks, if not months, to kind of schedule the work to update all the different projects to latest version of DBT or the right version of DBT. This is now very simple through the DBT Cloud environment, right? It takes no time at all, right? And you can kind of experiment going forward and backward with different versions. So it's really, nice and easy. In some of the things that we didn't like and we found lacking, that there was a little bit of a security almost issue with the integration with GitLab, where you were actually logging into GitLab through DBT Cloud. You were actually having access to more things than what you should be getting access to. I think this might be fixed since then. We kind of flagged this with DBT Labs. The other thing, the way we had our GitLab set up to work with DBT Core was not going to work with DBT Cloud. So we had to go through and kind of refactor or reorganize our Git. So just be mindful of that. If you're moving from core to cloud, you might need to kind of make some changes in your Git your repositories to make it work with Git dbt cloud. The other thing here is mentioned is Airflow. At that point in time, we had a pretty old version of Airflow, so we had to upgrade it, which was okay, but it just took a little bit of scheduling and coordination time with all the other things that run on Airflow. The other thing around this dbt cloud API that the developers were not too impressed with the documentation at that point in time. I'm not sure if that's changed now, but there were things and features and calls, that were not documented. So we would find out only about these particular features from, talking to the DBT Labs team. We don't use the APIs heavily, so it's not a big issue, but that was one thing that we kind of flagged. The documentation is good. I mean, I really like DBT docs. But it's kind of contained within the DBT cloud environment. So if anybody needs access to that, they have to get a read-only license if they're not a developer. We now have a catalog that actually connects to DBT cloud and extracts metadata so other people can see the lineage in DBT through our data catalog. But yeah, there's a little bit of management around docs that's was a little bit something that we weren't quite expecting, I guess. And then the last thing really was just a point that for enterprise orchestration, we're not using DBT Cloud. DBT Cloud might be used for like scheduling individual DBT projects, but for enterprise orchestration, we still use Airflow. Okay, so some of the, going back to the business case, these are some of the numbers that we kind of looked at. I think we spoke about this in terms of the saving of the time of analyst and data engineer time, and then how does it actually then translate to their utilization. So we worked out that 7% they can be, I guess, 7% more productive doing the higher value. So overall utilization, I suppose, is improved by 7%. And in terms of the low value tasks, things like maintaining environments or upgrading your machine or whatever, up to 32%. So you don't have to spend 30% of your low value task and just be gone to DBT cloud. Now, one other thing that just to point out, we were, as part of the business case, we also were proposing to consolidate some of the other tools that we had in Flybuys. So we had another ETL tool that we were using for the data transformation. This tool, was expensive. So our argument is that we will switch that tool off. We will use that money and savings from that to kind of fund the DBT. So if you can find things like that within your organization that, consolidating the toolkit, that you can kind of repurpose that funds and that, money for something like DBT Cloud, that's a good way to kind of go about trying to kind of secure some funding for this. And that is, I guess, across all these things. So ETL tool, the cost of AWS services that are required to run the DBT core, some of the SageMaker. So some people are using SageMaker for transformation and scheduling it using Control M. All these things are quite expensive. So reducing their expenditure was always like a good positive argument for switching that off and then going to DBT Cloud. All right, so in terms of transition, we started small. We got only 10 licenses for a small data engineering and data analyst team, excuse me, single squad. And then we piloted that with one or two use cases. And then we did that over, unfortunately, it took us almost two quarters, 6 months to kind of get to do that. But the end of that, it was successful. We did another mini reassessment, I suppose, and then we went for another 20, 30 licenses, I think. Yeah, so I think that approach worked for us. Probably took too long, to be honest, but I would have preferred it if it was only a single quarter, but it kind of stretched across two. And not something that was in our control. But yeah, it was successful. That little pilot was successful, and therefore we kind of moved it to a bigger group of people. Now, where are we at now? 2 years later, we have over 100 projects now that are developed by several teams, including the analytics team. So analytics teams are also building the DBT projects. DBT Cloud is the endorsed platform. So for any enterprise-grade data transformation, it's the only thing that we build new pipelines in. The ROI, well, still it's positive. It's not as high as originally calculated. And the reason for that are a couple of reasons for that. One is that the structure of the organization has happened. Like since then, we had reorg basically within Flybuys, and therefore it's really hard to kind of understand the actual cost of the savings around team time because the team structures have changed. So unfortunately, that's one thing that so we couldn't really calculate it properly. And the other thing is that some of those tools that we were hoping to kind of decommission are still around. So some of the other ETL tool is still around. Some of the DBT core code is still around. So I guess the thing to kind of keep in mind, I suppose, is that if you don't want to hit that ROI target from the start, you really need to kind of plan out the proper migration, including some of the decommissioning of things that you don't want to keep around anymore and you don't want to spend money on because that does affect your ROI. Now, having said that, analysts and data engineers are very highly satisfied. They're very, very happy with DBT Cloud. It's going really strong. There are no issues really at all. Like it's connected to Git, it's working really well. So we are very, very happy with that. And we're actually, now kind of using DBT Cloud as kind of like a central piece in our ecosystem. And we're looking to integrate with vendors such as, Fivetran, Hightouch, this open metadata, collate data catalog. There's a bunch of tools now and vendors that can actually integrate with DBT Cloud very nicely. So yeah, so it's kind of, very happy with that. And yeah, I think the main kind of thing for me was that, people are now really kind of understanding how to use it. And, just it's not really a question now of using different toolkits as well. So going from that very complex way of doing lots of different things in a different way to just being simple, like, you don't have to think about how you're going to build a pipeline. It's there. You can just use it and you just go for it. All right, I think that's me for now. Thank you very much. I hope you got some useful information, some insights. For that, this was our journey. Everybody's going to be different, of course, but at least hopefully kind of it frames your thinking around, like, if you are thinking about going to DBT Cloud, how you can propose, like, how you can structure your proposal for that. So I'll hand it over to Mark for a demo now. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Milos. How good was that? A really concrete and honest, practical insight on how DBT Cloud has helped Flybuys. If you haven't met me before, my name is Mark. I'm a solution architect at DBT Labs. I have a background in data engineering, solution architecture, and I mostly focused before DBT in anti-money laundering, anti-fraud, and criminal intelligence. When I had first joined DBT, I actually hadn't heard of it. During the interview process, I had to construct a bit of a demo, and I was asked to build a pipeline in DBT. And I was just so surprised at how simple it was to build the pipeline, how it automatically generated lineage, how it could easily see my dependencies, set up data testing, all without manually kind of dragging and dropping. And in the same vein of what Milo said, really making the complex simple. Today, I thought we'd take you firstly on a journey on how we got to where we are today, going through a bit of the history of DBT Cloud. And the second part is the demo. Firstly, how did we start? A bit of history. Back in 2016, we were a humble analytics consulting firm called Fishtown Analytics, and we built and open sourced a product called DBT. That still stands for Data Build Tool. And that was really to improve the way that analysts work. It offered a really simple but powerful way of writing data transformation logic that allows teams to quickly and collaboratively develop code using SQL but also using software development best practices. Eventually, we became DBT Labs. We went to market with our own commercial product, DBT Cloud, which was built on that same powerful transformation workflow. New built-in features helped automate and expedite data workflows with accessible ways to author code in the IDE. Here's what DBT looks like today. It's now an end-to-end platform that uses metadata from across the data development workflow to create a data control plane to build, deploy, catalog, orchestrate, and observe analytics pipelines. Why this evolution? A few months ago, I was in Japan for work. We visited a bunch of prospects, clients, partners, and we presented the same honeycomb slide. And we were asked a really interesting question. What's the strategy behind our feature choices and where we decide to build in the future? The guiding principle for us is simple. More data and more collaborations creates more complexity. And so our goal with all of our innovations is to help manage that complexity effectively. In simple terms, it's to make the complex simple. Fast forward from 2016 to today, DBT is now the standard for data transformation at scale. DBT Cloud is a cloud-native solution that sits on top of your data platform, and it builds on DBT's reputation as the best way to build, test, document your data pipelines while supercharging it with critical security, governance, automation, and data collaboration features necessary for managing data at scale. In the demo, we're going to cover 6 areas. We'll have a look at what it looks like to build in DBT, to deploy at scale. We'll also have a look at CI/CD checks that are built into the DBT workflow. We'll look at the tests, setting up tests and alerts. We'll also touch on DBT Mesh, a really key feature to really tame that complexity. Throughout the demo, we'll be looking through DBT Explorer, and then finally, we'll end off with semantic layer. Now, there's a lot to cover, so we won't be going too deep into each area. But if you're interested in diving deeper during the demo, please just hit the request a demo button, and that'll get you in touch with us. We're going to use this as a bit of a compass for our demo. We'll touch on all 6 areas, but we're going to start at the beating heart of DBT Cloud. What does the developer and analyst workflow look like? Where are we actually getting the time savings that Milos was talking about? So with that said, why don't we go into the Cloud IDE? Here we are. Right now, we're in the develop section of DBT Cloud, the Cloud IDE. This is where developers are going to spend the bulk of their time building, testing, documenting their code before production. For the demo today, we're going to do a simple transformation, and we're also going to see what the debugging workflow looks like in DBT. First, why don't we open up a model? A model in DBT you can think of as a data object. It could be a table, it could be a view. The definition of that model is a simple SQL select statement. Part of DBT's charm is that it abstracts away the need to write complex DDL and DML statements and allows users and analysts to just focus on the select statement, which is where the business logic truly lies. We can preview the data, fact orders, and in this data set, we have an order table. Each row represents an order, and we can see a few dimensions on this table giving us status code, whether it's fulfilled or not, how much the order was, any discount amount, so on and so forth. What we don't have in this table is any information about geography. But we do have a foreign key over here, the customer key column. So why don't we open up the dim customers model? This is another table defined by another select statement. I can view the results over here and see that each row represents a customer, along with various dimensions like where they live, their address, their nation, and their region. If we click over to lineage, we can also see the constituent parts of dim customers. We can quickly tell that dim customers finds its source data in TPCH customer, TPCH nation, TPCH region. We can see that it goes through a staging layer before it finally gets created into a dimension model. So what does it look like to actually create a transformation in DBT? We're going to create a new model called orders by nation. And in this, we're just going to start creating our select statement. So we're going to grab everything from orders. I'll be using an alias for now. We'll grab nation from customers. We'll grab market segment from customers, and we'll grab region customers. As I'm typing in the IDE, dbt is helping me autocomplete. So for instance, I'm doing a ref statement to fact orders. The models in my folder are all indexed, which makes it easy to reference them. And we're going to do a left join on dim customers. Two, we'll call that customers. And then we'll reference our foreign key. This is the primary key. So let's press save. And we can see what happens to our lineage. Automatically, this gets updated with all the inherited lineage of fact orders and dim customers. I can hit preview and see that to make sure that my code is working correctly. We have all the orders here, as well as nation, market segment, and region. Additionally, I might want to format my code with the conventions that my team has defined. So if I press fix over here, it's going to use the centralized definition in the SQL fluff file to format my code. If, for instance, we would like to change the way we format, for instance, I prefer my commas to be leading and my keywords to be capitalized, we can change that in the centralized SQL fluff file. And the next time I press fix, it'll reflect those changes. All right, so we've built our model. The data looks like it works. Why don't we apply some documentation and testing on this model as well? For those of you familiar with dbt, you'll know that dbt runs off two main file types. We have SQL files and YAML files. SQL files contain the business logic, the actual select statements, whereas the YAML files contain the metadata about each model. So for instance, for our dim customers model, we've defined a few descriptions, and we've also defined some tests. So why don't we do the same thing for orders by nation? We're going to use dbt assist. That's our inbuilt LLM. That's going to auto-generate me some descriptions on each of the columns that I've created in orders by nation, as well as give its best interpretation of what each of those columns are. So for instance, in this case, the description it's given is this model combines order details with some customer data to provide insights on orders segmented by customer nation, market segment, and region. It's pretty good. I also want to implement testing. So I'm going to pop over back to orders by nation, click dbt assist, and generate tests. It's going to determine my columns, and it's going to apply appropriate tests to each of those columns. Now, it's not going to test everything, because sometimes we don't need to test every single column, but it's correctly identified order key as my primary key, so it's applied unique and not null. It's applied a not null on my order date, and a customer key, we've put a not null. One of the other tests I might want to manually create is a relationships back to the staging layer. I want to make sure that all of the customer IDs that are represented in orders by nation also exist in the upstream table. So here I'm going to use the autocomplete again. Reference the stage EPCH customers and the custom key. So we're going to pop over back to orders by nation.sql and hit build. Now this is a one-click operation. There's no need to type in the command. dbt will auto-populate that command for us, and it's going to do two things. It's going to materialize orders by nation and run all the tests that we've set up. We can see all the tests have passed, and so we're pretty good to go. All right, before we commit our changes, we've just been told that there's been an issue with one of the dashboards that use our data downstream. The returned orders dashboard is now broken and reporting data quality issues. What does it look like to use dbt Explorer to investigate these issues so that we can debug in a far more efficient and speedy manner? I'm going to head over to dbt Explorer, which you can find on the side panel over here. Now, Explorer gives you an unprecedented insight into your data's documentation and lineage. We can use it to view our whole project lineage, which is exactly the same as we could see in the IDE. This looks a little bit messy to me, so I can use a lens to slice using different information. For example, if we do have a data quality issue in the returned orders dashboard, we can use test status to quickly identify where that error might be happening. Very quickly, I can see the test status of each of these models, and they've all passed except for aggregated return orders by month, and there are some warnings upstream from that. And we can see what aggregated returned orders by month might be impacting, the returned orders exposure. Let me double click that. What is an exposure? An exposure is a way for you to tell DBT how your data is being used outside of DBT. For instance, in this case, the returned orders exposure is a dashboard, and we can open it up here. We can have a look at what the consumer is seeing, and we indeed see a return rate dashboard, which is hovering around 10%, but we do see a large spike. It's a great way for you to improve the communication between teams. Heading back to returned orders, we can expand the data quality error and see where it's happening. We can see that it's happening in the returned orders by month model. There's a warning in line items and a warning in TPCH suppliers. I can also look at the full lineage from source all the way to returned orders, how my data gets transformed through the staging layer, through the intermediate layer, and through the marks layer. I can also slice back to test status to again see where I might start my investigation. Let's open up aggregated returned orders by month and have a look at the test that's failing. I'm going to expand test results, and we can see the threshold test has a big fail. If we open that up, we can actually see the underlying code of that data quality test. We can see in this test, we're testing for return rate. To our business, a return rate greater than 50% doesn't make sense. That means 1 in every 2 people are returning their orders. But that's not the full story. We want to know how return rate is calculated. If I head back to aggregated returned orders by month, I can go to the code and I can see how return rate is calculated. Now, if I wanted to know where I get these columns of returned orders and order item key, I can actually go to the column section of Explorer and expand the column level lineage of return rate. This will give me a view all the way back to source of where the data comes from, which is used to calculate return rate. What I'm really curious about is this one over here, the is returned column in TPCH line items. Why? Because earlier we saw that TPCH line items was actually issuing up warnings. And it makes sense for us to start as far left as possible in our investigation. If I double click is return, we can see that any issues in the is return column will be impacting all of these downstream models. And here was where our warning is. There was a warning against the return flag. So with that, we're as far left of the DAG left as we can possibly get. So why don't we start our investigation here? We're going to open up the IDE. This is going to take us back to the Cloud IDE where we can start modifying our data. We can see the return flag column, and we're going to preview our data to see what we're working with. If you scroll over to the right, we can see the return flag. Now, the return flag is calculated from using a case when statement. Ingesting the L return flag column, when that's an R, then return returned. And if that's an A, return accepted. Anything else will return unknown. Now, we're expecting 100% of our results to be covered by returned and accepted. However, when we look at our data, return flag is returning unknown. The best step now is to look at our source data and see the values of L return flag. Is there anything beyond R and A that we're not expecting? Since there's a CTE up the top, I can preview the selection just to have a look at the raw source data. And we're going to find L return flag. And just like that, we've found N. N is not handled by our case when condition. We have R's and A's, but no handling for N. We found out that N should actually be treated as accepted. It doesn't mean that a client has returned their data. So we need to change our case when statement to handle for N. And that's quite simple. We just need to add N to the case when statement, hit save. And from here, how do we test that this has worked? Well, using the build dropdown, we can build model downstream. dbt will work out all of the dependencies of TPCH line items, run the data quality tests, including the accepted values test, which was warning, and the failed test in aggregated returned orders. We can see the status as we go. We've passed stage line items. We've actually passed the accepted values return flag. So we can be confident there's no other unknowns that we're not handling for. And as we scroll down, the previously failing threshold test is now passing. Great news. Okay, so what have we done so far? We've created a new model called orders by nation. We've also created documentation, data quality testing on the orders by nation. And then finally, we've debugged an issue that was causing data quality issues downstream. We've fixed it and also ran the dependencies and checked it in development environment. And through it, we've been able to see the ease of use of the dbt Cloud IDE to accelerate and save time when developing data transformations. The IDE also eliminates the need to be a Git expert. As we've been coding, the Git integration has been changing based on the next best step. You're getting the benefit of Git without the hassle. In addition, we haven't really had to run any command. It's all been done through one-click operations. Now, we can also see that we're in a protected branch. Some of the engineers in the audience might be having their alarm bells triggered. You should never commit directly into main, but look what happens when I press commit and sync. dbt knows that this is a protected branch, and so it will prompt you to create a feature branch before you go and merge your code. So we'll call it feature patch 03, and we say we created the orders by nation table and debugged TPCH line items. Commit changes. Now, dbt will create the branch for us, check out the branch, and then commit our changes. We can see that that branch is changed. We've only made it in a feature branch. We haven't accidentally overwritten main. And now dbt is asking us, do you want to raise a pull request? Now, why don't we see how dbt gives you confidence in deploying to production through CI/CD. We're going to raise a pull request. This is going to point us to GitHub. We can have a look at our code change, and it looks like there's nothing out of the ordinary. We have our new model. We have the model that we've fixed. We're going to create the pull request along with our template. And our GitHub is going to kick off a dbt Cloud CI job. We can see that down here. When I click details, this is going to point us back into the dbt Cloud interface. And we're looking specifically at the deploy section of dbt. GitHub has automatically kicked off a dbt Cloud CI check. Now, what is this check going to do? Firstly, dbt Cloud is going to create for you a temporary schema. Your code is yet to be tested against production data. So dbt is creating a safe space in a safe schema for you. Because dbt is Git aware, it knows what models that you've changed, and so we'll test those code changes against production data. Any tables it makes will be in that temporary schema. It's also going to run the downstream dependencies of all those models. Remember, we modified line items. It's going to run all of the downstream models to make sure all of those data quality tests are also passed. Finally, it's going to do a data diff. We're going to be able to see what happens when we roll out this change. What's going to happen to my underlying data? If we click the lineage tab, we'll see the models that were run as part of this CI check, did everything downstream from TPCH line items and orders by nation, as well as all these models. On the model timing tab, we can see how long each of these models took to run. The green nodes tell us how long our tests are running, and we can see we're passing all of our tests. Most excitingly, if we click compare, we're going to see which models have been modified, what has been added, and what has been removed. If I expand what's been modified, I can quickly see if I roll out these changes as part of the pull request into production, I'm going to modify 51% of my data. That's 30,000 rows. It's going to impact 2 columns. If I have a look at the modified rows, I can see it's turning all of these return flags to accepted, and therefore turning all of the isReturn flags to false. That's perfect. That's just what we want. We can see the columns as well that it's modified. We scroll down, it will show what's been added, these data quality tests, our orders by nation model, and we can see what's been removed. Now, since we've passed the CI check, we can click back to the GitHub pull request. And what we can see is that dbt has generated a CI report comment inside GitHub. We can see what's been passed and warned against. It's the same details we were seeing in the run. And we can also see the compare changes. Again, the same details that we saw in the CI job, but now as a GitHub PR comment. In addition, we can scroll down and just verify that the dbt Cloud CI check has been run successfully. Now, all we're waiting for is a merge approver to approve this request. So I hope you can see how dbt Cloud helps you get your code into production faster by giving you the confidence you need. So we've talked a lot about the bottom row. We've talked a lot about CLI, CI, tests, and alerts. We've also had a look at the dbt Explorer. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about mesh. As your dbt project starts to mature and grow, it starts to get far more complex. Now, this isn't a problem that's unique to data. This problem was actually experienced in software architecture, where people were building monolithic code repositories with interconnected dependencies. It made it very hard to kind of stretch out and isolate functionality. Now, that problem was solved using microservices, where we would take a monolithic repository and break it out into smaller atomic pieces. And we're bringing the same thing to data with dbt Mesh. We're allowing you to take a big code repository and break it up. It might be domain-aligned projects. It might be for data as a product. But what it essentially means is that you can break up your project into smaller bite-sized pieces with an engineering hub and perhaps a marketing spoke, a revenue spoke, all isolated code repositories, but with the ability to share models between each of them using cross-project references. That means if you're in the marketing team, you're not going to be overburdened with all the complexity in the engineering team. And if you're in the engineering team, you're actually going to see end-to-end how your models are used by folks downstream. But Mesh is more than just the ability to share models. It's also the ability to govern models. For example, let's say marketing is using our customers' dataset. If they're using our customers' dataset, building dashboards, building models, building algorithms on top of it, they need to be absolutely assured that the shape of their data can be guaranteed. The columns will all be there. The types of the data will all be there. Otherwise, if they build on top of it, their downstream dependencies will break. And so within dbt, you can define contracts so that you can guarantee the shape and type of your data. In addition, what if finance also used the customer dataset, but they need to actually roll out some changes? How do we supply to both needs? Traditionally, that would mean fixing it and then forcing marketing to update their code in a big bang approach. That orchestration between teams can be quite political and really hard to organize. Instead, dbt leverages of a similar concept to API versioning. Why not we create a pre-release version of the model to supply to the finance team's needs? Marketing can still be pinned to an older version, but they'll now get a notification to say, hey, look, there's a pre-release version. We're hoping to deprecate the older version at a certain time. Please prioritize this when your sprint allows. Contracts and versions allow this communication to exist. And then finally, we need the ability to control access. We need to control what tables marketing and finance can see and what they can't see. If they can see everything, they would lead to the same problem as the monolithic repository, where there's an overburden of information for everyone else. So you need to be able to dictate model access as private or public. If we head back to the IDE, we can see that very clearly in Explorer. If I go to View Lineage and I zoom into fact order items, I can very clearly see that we have fact order items set to public. And I can see this dotted line, which indicates that the sales team is using my fact order items table. I can actually double click into the sales project and see their scope of the universe. It's a lot more pared down, a lot simpler. They're not a highly technical group of people. They just need to run simple analytics off of my fact tables. If I zoom out, I can see a high-level overview of the project architecture that data analytics has 3 public models, and it's sharing those with the sales and the marketing team. And we can also see that sales team is sharing a model with marketing as well. We can quickly see what those public models are. And Team Customers shows us a great example of model versions. If we often open version 1, we can see that deprecation notification. This is an older model. Perhaps we shouldn't use it. We should upgrade to the latest. And imagine your consumer. You need to be guaranteed that not just the shape of the data, that's important. The shape of the data must be guaranteed, but the quality must be also. As a consumer, you can use Explorer to see the data quality test results. You can also scroll down to make sure that there has been a contract enforced on that table before you go and use it. If I scroll up, I want to see the refresh rates. How often is this model getting refreshed? And is it succeeding every time? And indeed, I can zoom out for the last 3 months of data for this model on how it's been performing, and to see whether there's any failures or successes, and to see if there's any data quality issues over time. All of this in Explorer seeks to enable the data mesh to be a reality, for consumers to trust the data that producers are creating, and for producers to see end to end how their models are being used to allow for better governance. Okay, we've just seen how dbt Mesh enables domain-level data ownership without compromising on governance or creating silos. Let's wrap up the last few minutes by talking about dbt Semantic Layer. How do we deliver consistent metrics wherever downstream teams work? Today, metrics are defined separately in many tools. For example, if we were asking the question, what was revenue in June? Often businesses have multiple BI teams, data science teams, data application teams. And often revenue would be defined separately in each of those teams. The problem arises when we double click on each of those definitions. We can see some BI teams might be including returns. Some might be including services revenue. Some might be taking away tax. And my favorite, some might be just hard coding figures to align with perhaps another figure that they've seen of revenue. We think that that logic actually belongs in a centralized layer, the dbt semantic layer. If you take that logic and push it closer to where the data lives, that means you can have more integrations with the same dbt semantic layer. We want everyone to get the same answers everywhere, every time. But what does that look like in practice? Imagine we're one of the BI teams wanting to query the semantic layer. The primary tool of choice is Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. Let's hop into Google Sheets and see that integration. We can see on the right here a dbt semantic layer query builder. We can select the dropdown and see all the various metrics. Today, we need to figure out what our top profit contributing centers are by nation and region. So we're going to query total profit and slice it by nation and region. And we're going to order by profit descending. Here we can see that Canada, Egypt, and Iran are our top 3 centers with 109, 106, $104 million respectively. But what if we were in the data application? Perhaps we have an LLM built on top of the dbt semantic layer. What if we ask the same question? Well, here we have an inbuilt LLM called AskDBT, and we're going to ask it the same question. What is total profit split by nation and region, sorted by largest profit? It's communicating with our dbt semantic layer, grabbing that business logic and reporting it back. And here the name of the game is consistency. Canada, Egypt, Iran, with 109, 106, 104 million. We can also use this. Now let's wrap it up with one more demo. Imagine we're one of the other business intelligence teams. Instead of Excel, we actually like using Tableau. In Tableau, it's a very similar experience to just interacting with any old data set. We can drag in total profit and have a look at the nations. We'll sort by total profit, and we can see the consistency. Canada, Egypt, Iran, with the exact same figures that we saw in Sheets and our LLM. And that's not it. Because you've defined your metrics in dbt, we also have end-to-end lineage of that metric. As we head back to Explorer, we can see our metrics on the left here. We can see total profit, the metric that we've been querying so far. And as we click into it, we can see the whole full lineage of total profit, how it gets calculated, from which models it gets calculated from, and where our source data lies. We can also go from here and see the test status. Remember, quality is central to DBT. All of these metrics are version controlled and will be exposed to any downstream integration. Our main aim here is so that everyone gets the same answers everywhere, every time. I want to thank you all for listening. I know at times it'll have felt like you're drinking from a fire hydrant. Again, this isn't meant to make you an expert of DBT Cloud. It is meant to show you the value that we bring to your data strategy. Please get in touch by pressing the request a demo button if you want to dig into any of these features deeper. But with that, I'm going to hand back to Leah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. I've got some next steps here for you. So you can get started with your own DBT Cloud trial. That's in the docs section of Goldcast. That's a free DBT Cloud trial. You can also click the orange Talk to an Expert button at the top right-hand corner of Goldcast to meet with a DBT Cloud expert about your specific use case and get your questions answered that way. And then I also posted a survey in the chat. I'd really appreciate it if you took that survey, gave us your feedback, and let us know how to improve these sessions for you. Alrighty, y'all. Well, thanks so much again. I hope you have the best day ever, and we'll see you later. Bye.